And I would like to ask all of you to please give a very warm welcome to our speaker tonight, Paul Langenbahn.
Well, Hayden, thank you for that very warm welcome and very generous description of the work we're doing at NCR. I'm very thankful for that. And thank you to Dory, to the Dean, and to the Scheller College of Business for having me here today. And most of all, I want to thank you for our very warm welcome to the neighborhood. If you haven't noticed, we moved in about 3 blocks away. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is something that's very transformational for our company. Believe it or not, buildings and facilities really can change the culture and the performance of a company, and we believe that will be true for NCR. And so we're delighted to be here. Again, I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, but one of the reasons that building is sitting there about 3 blocks away is because all of you are sitting here. And so we couldn't be happier to be nearby. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of themes for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But the first theme that we'll talk about is business model transformation. And I'll talk about some themes I want you to think about there in terms of opening your aperture a bit beyond the 24-hour news cycle and the 1-quarter financial reports that you see when you look into a company, and think about how a company might transform over time. The second thing we'll talk about for a few minutes is the concept of disruption and innovation. And we talk a lot about technological disruption, and technological disruption is a very important enabler to the advancement of all sorts of things. But in a business model disruption accompanying technological disruption is every bit as important. And I'll tell you a few stories from very different periods of time in NCR's history about how we've approached that. And I thought that might be useful to you as you think forward to your careers in business and some of the challenges that you might face as the future leaders of companies. Now, let me see if I can figure out the technology of the clicker here. Try it now. Aha! All right, we're in business. Okay. So as I mentioned, the first thing we'll talk about is reinvention. And I want to take you back in time. It's actually a relatively short period of NCR's history, but I want to take you back to about a 10 to 12 year period and tell you a little bit of a story about a company, where it was, where it is now, and where it's headed, to give you some perspective on what reinvention really looks like, right? So, by the way, does anybody in the audience know what the letters NCR stand for? Who knows? Oh, quite a number of you, okay. National Cash Register Company. To give you some perspective, NCR was founded in 1884. So we're a 134-year-old startup. It has been reinvented in those 134 years actually several times, right? If you think about, just to put it in perspective, in 1884, when NCR was founded, and it was founded really with the purpose of commercializing the cash register, about that time, Carl Benz was also the first one to mass produce an automobile. So when NCR started producing its first product, think about it this way, there were no cars or trucks to take it to market. So over those, just to give you a little bit of perspective, but over those 134 years, the company's been reinvented several times, survived world wars, the Great Depression, all kinds of change. Let's just go back 12 years. Let's go back to about 2006. And the company had been through a period of time where there had been several changes of direction. It was actually, for a brief period of time, acquired by AT&T AT&T, in their wisdom at the time, decided that they wanted to manufacture personal computers and decided acquiring NCR was a good way to do that. Turned out to not be a very good match, and a few years later, they spit out the company again as a publicly held organization. They paired it up with another company you may know a little bit about. It's based here in Atlanta called Teradata, and so they spun off NCR and Teradata together. Fast forward a few years to about 2005, and when I arrived at the company a number of years ago, I started asking some people who'd been around for a little while, well, what was NCR like, before our current transformation really started taking shape? And what they would tell you is, well, these were words somebody actually used in one of my first weeks with the company. It was like we were burning the furniture to heat the house. So in the lack of innovation for a number of years was really driving the company towards really aggressive cost cutting, right, to try to survive. And that was the feeling that our employees was left with, that we were burning the furniture to heat the house. Our CEO at the time was somebody who'd grown his career at NCR. He'd built a good reputation at the company, and he was leading the company through this time. He's a fellow by the name of Mark Hurd, who eventually left to become CEO of HP, is now one of the co-CEOs of Oracle Corporation. But he left to pursue that opportunity, and the board brought in a new CEO. His name's Bill Nudi. He's our CEO today. And together they said, hey, we've got to do something drastically different, right? To take NCR forward, to create a next great chapter of this historic, iconic company, we've got to do something very different. And so they set about on a plan to do a radical transformation of the company. So here's the first thing I would like for you to take away from this. A transformation doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 3 years. You have to open your eyes. You have to have a very wide aperture and be willing to make a long-term commitment to change. So what this chart shows you here is 3 periods, roughly 5 years each, where the company did some fundamental things towards the transformation. The first period, starting in 2006 when Bill joined, they said, hey, you know what? We can't execute the growth strategies that we ultimately need to execute if we don't fix the foundation of the company. And so they did some really foundational things that were very important. So for one, when AT&T had spun NCR back out, they paired it up with Teradata. Teradata was significantly outperforming the core NCR business on every metric: revenue growth, margin, market share expansion. And the company could afford just to invest modestly in innovation and in R&D. And so every dollar the company could afford to invest had to go to Teradata, because that's where it would get the best return, right? Unfortunately, that meant we were starving the core business. We were actually making the problem worse. And so the first step that Bill and the board had to take was the very courageous step to actually spin off the only performing asset the company had, which was Teradata. So they sold the best performing part of the business so that they could save the core of the company. And they spun off Teradata, and that allowed the company to start to invest in fixing the foundation. The next thing, the company was largely built around hardware and services of hardware, but it had not really invested in modernizing manufacturing and supply chain. Again, if you talk to people who were around at the time, they'd tell you you'd visit our one factory, which was in Dundee, Scotland, and you'd find a very nice Scottish gentleman assembling an ATM from the bottom to the top, one at a time, craftsman style, right? It wasn't even really a modern assembly line. And so we built 5 factories, 3 of them in emerging markets, close to where the growth we thought would come from, right? So we built factories in Manaus, Brazil. We built a factory in China. We built a factory in India. The next thing we had to do is modernize our supply chain. The company didn't have an ERP, and you guys probably heard stories about what ERP implementations look like for large companies, right? They had to do one of those. And then most importantly, as they plotted their vision for what they wanted the company to become, they realized that where we were located was really important. And that brings us back to this building. So the company was located in Dayton, Ohio, and it had grown up as a manufacturing company, right? Kind of an old school brick and mortar manufacturing company, and Dayton was a fine city for that kind of company. But we knew for the next phase of the company that we had to attract high-tech talent. And despite all the great assets that Dayton had as a city, it probably wasn't the place to do that. And so they had to say, well, where do we move NCR? First of all, it's hard to pick up a 2,000-person headquarters and move it, right? That's a really challenging thing, especially for a company that's not performing very well. But they also had to pick a place where to go. Well, you might aspire to be your tech company. You want to build a software business. Let's go to Silicon Valley. Let's go to Austin. Let's go to Boston. But also had to recognize that NCR wasn't ready to compete for talent in those markets, right? NCR was not going to be an attractive enough recruiter of talent yet to go locate there. So we had to pick a city where NCR could really make a meaningful impact, where there were great institutions developing talent like Georgia Tech. And so that's how we wound up picking out Atlanta as our new home. And so in this period, this first period, the company moved its headquarters, a 2,000-person operation from Dayton, Ohio, to Atlanta. We originally settled in Duluth. We wound up with 6 buildings across 3 campuses spread across the Atlanta suburbs. We were a bit everywhere and nowhere in Atlanta. And finally, this year, we were able to get to our future home right here in Midtown Atlanta next to you. So that's that first 5 years of the transformation. Was really, those are the kind of things the company had to do to just set a solid foundation on which now it could execute its strategy. And that was a heavy lift. Now, the next 5 years, and this is how I came to be at NCR, when a company hasn't invested in innovation for a long period of time, what does it do? How does it make up the gap? It does mergers and acquisitions, right? It acquires somebody else's R&D, somebody else's investment in innovation. And so the company over the next few years spent $3.6 billion, which was roughly equal to our market cap, our public value as a company at the time, in 3 big acquisitions and a number of tuck-ins to accelerate innovation and build our software business around in the 3 markets that we serve. So as Hayden stated at the beginning, NCR provides technologies to companies that you're going to interact with in consumers. It's where you bank, it's where you shop, and where you eat, right? And so we did 3 strategic acquisitions. First was a company in the restaurant technology space, primarily called Radiant Systems here in Atlanta. I was a member of the team at Radiant Systems. We then acquired a company based outside of Tel Aviv, Israel, called Retalix, which specialized in software for retailers. We acquired the largest provider of digital banking services. So if you bank with a community financial institution and you use their app, it's that technology called Digital Insight. We did a number of tuck-ins around that, and we also started increasing our investment in organic innovation significantly at the same time. So we essentially acquired those assets, started investing significantly around them, and that was really the middle part of the reinvention. Was we had built the solid foundation, and then we used our balance sheet essentially to accelerate innovation where we had failed to invest before. So that was phase 2. Now phase 3, we're just at the front end of, really. We've just been going for a year or 2 on, and that is really taking all of these assets that we've acquired and that we've invested in and really putting our vision in place for the future, right? Taking that and turning it all into action. So we changed the way the company was organized. During the phase 1 and phase 2, we organized the business around the vertical markets that we serve. So we had a business focused on financial services institutions, one on retailers, one on restaurants. And the reason we organize like that, it's an inefficient model, right? Because you don't have one software or an R&D organization serving all the businesses. You don't have one professional services organization, one sales organization. You have a lot of duplication. It's very inefficient, but it allows you to be very intimate with the markets you're served, make very fast decisions. And so we chose over efficiency, being market intimacy, speed of decision making, and so on. We've pivoted the organization now to say, okay, we've acquired all these assets. We can leverage a lot of these things across multiple businesses. And so we put all of software together in one software organization across NCR. When you think about omni-channel experiences for consumers, a lot of the problems retailers, restaurants, and banks are trying to solve are very similar, right? So we have a lot of assets we can bring to bear to create these kind of consumer experiences that we can share across the different businesses we serve. And so as we go into this third phase, we're really kind of shifting the organization and the orientation of the company to now accelerate the strategy. So again, why do we talk about all this? I think the thing I wish somebody had told me when I was sitting in one of these chairs is that the chart isn't always up and to the right, right? Bumpy road. I've had the real privilege of being both part of a startup and being part of a transformation. And let me just tell you, the chart is not up and to the right all the time. These things are hard. Business is hard. Business is challenging. And when we were building Radiant Systems, when I had an opportunity to be part of that, which was a startup born here in Atlanta, that we eventually sold for over $1 billion to NCR, we had lots of times where we were challenged, lots of times where we questioned whether we were going to make it. But we stuck with it for 17 years, and eventually we made it. And it's the same thing's true in a reinvention. If you look at it, NCR at any 1 year or 1 quarter time period during this 12-year reinvention, you might question if we were going to make it. But if you open your aperture and you're willing to look for a period of a couple of years or longer, and you see where we started and where we are now, you can see what really can be done. And that's really the first thing I'd like to leave you with today is don't leave here thinking everything will be up and to the right and that it's always easy. It's actually really hard, and that's okay. That's what makes the destination worth it when you get there. So today, 12 years later, where we essentially had no software business at NCR, we now have a $2 billion software business. About 8,000 of our 30,000 associates work in our software business. It's the fastest growing part of the company, and it's about 70% of the company's profits. So if you look at where we started, where we wound up today, it's quite a transformation story. Okay. Second thing, and then we'll get to questions here. So I'll tell you another story. We're going to go back in time a little bit farther. The guy in the picture here, I don't know, does he look like a disruptor to you or not? So that is John Henry Patterson. The photo is probably taken in the late 1800s. I'm not sure exactly what year. But he was the father of NCR, the father of really the commercialization of the cash register. And what this picture is of is of the business model innovation part of the NCR story. So John didn't invent the cash register. The cash register was invented in 1883 by a guy named James Whitty, and it was called Whitty's Incorruptible Cash Register. And the business problem that they were trying to solve was really simple, which was if you were a merchant or a tavern owner at the time, your biggest problem was essentially employee theft, right? It was graft by your employees, people taking money from your customers and not giving you the proceeds. So if you weren't there minding your shop, you were probably getting stolen from blind. And so the whole idea of the cash register was to electronically record the sales so that you knew you got paid. Now, Mr. Whitty left one important innovation out of his invention, and that was the paper receipt. So the paper receipt actually was the innovation that John Patterson added that kept the ongoing journal of all the sales, right, long before computers. This is 1884. So that when the shopkeeper came back to the shop, he could see if the cash in the till matched the sum of the receipts. So that was the technological innovation, and that was important, but it wasn't enough. That technological innovation couldn't have created this 134-year-old iconic company. And the reason it wasn't enough was because it had to be accompanied with business model innovation. So what John did, he didn't invent the cash register. He improved it in an important way. But what he really innovated on was the business model. So there was no concept at the time of a large field-based sales organization. So he invented the concepts of things like sales territories and quotas. He and his brother-in-law wrote the first sales training manual. And the picture that you see here is of their university that they created. So Patterson actually created a university at the home of NCR in Dayton. They called it Sugar Camp. And this is actually before they even had buildings. This is a big tent, if you could tell there. But a new sales rep would sign on with NCR from anywhere in the country, and they'd hop on a train, and they would take the train to Dayton, and they would stay there for several weeks and be trained in the art of sales and the professionalism of sales. And John is really credited with really developing the first kind of professional discipline around sales in the world. They also were the first to implement direct mail marketing as an innovation that hadn't existed before. So if you think about it, again, as I mentioned earlier, this was about the time Carl Benz was first mass producing the automobile. There were no cars to go see a prospective customer. There were no trucks to deliver the equipment, right? So actually building a multinational organization required these sort of innovations. So by 1911, the company had sold its 1 millionth cash register. It had 95% global market share in the market that it served. By 1922, the company had sold its 2 millionth cash register, still had close to 95% market share. And while the technological innovation was important, it would have never happened if he didn't innovate on the business model as well. Okay, so that takes us forward to, I've lost my clicker, to NCR today. It's a slightly different experience if you come on board with NCR today. We won't take you to a tent in Dayton, but we will try to change you well. So as we think about innovation today, what are the lessons we can learn from our own transformation? What are the lessons we can learn from John Patterson back in the 1890s? And when we look at the three segments that we serve today, we see a ton of disruption coming on. And for a technology company, disruption is awesome if you embrace it, if you run towards it. If you try to protect your old business models and your old products, somebody else is going to innovate, somebody else is going to disrupt you, and you'll eventually go out of business. You don't survive for 134 years without being willing to break your own business model and disrupt yourself. And so that's what we're about today. That's about a lot of the work going on in the building down the street. So let's talk about one of the markets that we serve, the retail market. And let's think about your experience as a consumer in retail, okay? So your parents, not too many years ago, there was really two channels with which they would interact with a retailer. They might interact through a catalog, so there might have been an outside the store channel, right, to interact. When I was a kid, there was a Sears catalog, right? And you could buy almost anything out of the Sears catalog, and you'd pick your item and fill out the sheet, and you'd mail it to them, and they'd, eventually your product would show up in the mail. And then there was in the store. In the store, you'd pick your merchandise, you'd be helped by a cashier. Well, over the last several years, one of the innovations that's been going on in retail has been moving from assisted checkout, the cashier, to self-checkout where we actually just shifted the labor really from the store personnel to the consumer, right? So many of you probably at a Kroger or a Home Depot or a Walmart, you've taken and scanned your own goods at the self-checkout, right? That was an important innovation that NCR led a number of years ago. It's an important part of our revenue streams today, but that's not where the market's going. That's where the market is right now, right? So the areas we're investing in now are helping to meet our customers on the journey as they move from self-check or from assisted to self-checkout. The next thing you'll be doing is the consumer mobile scanning the items in the store as they shop. You'll pick items off the shelf, you'll scan them, put them into the basket, and have some checkout process either on your mobile device or at a terminal, maybe at the front of the store as you leave. That'll improve the consumer experience, remove a bit of friction. But that's not really where the puck is going, right? Has anybody seen the things in the press around Amazon Go? You seen a little bit about that? So if you haven't, Amazon's opened a single convenience store up in the Northwest, and the concept is through a lot of innovation around IoT and cameras and this sort of thing is that you, as a consumer, you walk in, you identify yourself by scanning your mobile device, and you pick your items off the shelf, and the technology in the store recognizes you and what you picked up and just charges you, and it's frictionless. You don't have to go through a self-checkout, you don't have to go to a cashier, you just pay. That's probably the way brick and mortar retailing should work at some point in the future. Now, they may not be taking it far enough, right? So if you think about a true omni-channel experience, if you think about what do you like about when you shop on Amazon, what's really going on when you shop on Amazon is they're watching all your habits, all your preferences, and they're making recommendations to you, right? They're telling you, our customers who looked at this also looked at this, or our customers who bought this with it, right? What's really going on down there, those recommendations, those are really advertisements, right? There are companies behind that who are saying, hey, Amazon, when your AI says that this customer is a good candidate for this product, I'll pay you to recommend it to them, right? Consumers are beginning to expect these kind of services, and for NCR, one of our challenges is how do we deliver those same kind of omni-channel experiences in the brick and mortar store as they're getting online, right? So we're working on those kind of things. What I want to do right now, we're at the top of the hour here, is I have some guests with me. So I have Shuki Lick. He runs the NCR Innovation Lab, which is right around the corner. And he's got a few of his team members with him that he's going to introduce. They're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the innovation we're doing about where retail is going. Not where it is right now, but where it's going. And the important thing for you to take away here is, yeah, you'll think, oh, you might think NCR is kind of cool. That's cool stuff to be working on. But how does NCR make money today? We make money today selling those self-checkout systems at the front of the Walmart, right? The hardware and the software. What we're working on here is designed to make those things unnecessary. So that's where we're disrupting ourselves, right? We are trying to break our own business, okay? And if we don't do this, somebody else will. And so a portion of our investment, a portion of our R&D always has to go to the future. So Shuki, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. My name is Shuki. I'm running the NCR Innovation Labs. I came to US 4 years ago from Tel Aviv. If you're not familiar with Tel Aviv is the #2 in the world after US about the companies that are running startups. I've been co-founder for 2 startups. The first one I really succeed and be sold for one of the big company. The second one I failed and I lose all the money for the first one. But my wife, we are now balanced so I can open another company. I joined to NCR 5 years ago. And the reason that I fall in love at NCR, because I haven't found any company in the world that have story about retailers, restaurants, traveling, and a financial institute. And then we decided 2 years ago to open what we call the NCR Innovation Labs, how we can run and act like a startup inside a big company of 30,000+ people. And I asked myself during my years, what are the 3 things that are important to succeed as a startup or to succeed as innovation labs inside the company? And there are 3 things that I would like that you will remember. The first one is vision, because if you don't have vision, you will not wake up and stay till late at night to work on your innovation stuff. The second one is very tactical, is a process. Guys, there's a lot of process today to run innovation. You need to run very, very fast. You need to fail very, very fast. But you know, no one really likes to fail, so you need to win a lot of times. So you need to show a lot of outcome. And the last one, and I think this is the most important that I found during my years, the most important are the people. You need a team to succeed. Because without a team that you can trust, team that never give up, team that always say yes, then you start to succeed. I want to introduce 2 of my team that are doing day and night to help NCR to take them to the next journey of things that we are working on. Brent and Adam, you are more welcome to come to the stage and introduce yourself.
Cool. Thanks, Shuki. My name is Brent Zucker. I'm a master's student here right now studying computer science and machine learning. I've been on Shuki's team for almost 2 years now. This is Adam.
Hey guys, I'm Adam Lieberman. I'm a software engineer in the Innovation Lab, Georgia Tech graduate. I did my undergrad here in math and then came back for grad school right after and studied computer science.
So we're trying to take what we've learned in the classroom, all the research papers that we've been reading, and kind of apply it to our projects at NCR. So since I've been with Shuki for the past 2 years, we've basically been running an AI startup inside the company. And when I first heard the story about NCR, and Shuki's telling me on day 1 that we're gonna, start building all these AI applications, I looked at him and I was surprised. How can this old company, they really want to change like this? They really want to disrupt themselves from the inside and out, and do all these crazy things. They want to have chatbots. They want to do computer vision. They want to do all this sort of stuff. So I was shocked when he told me that. And now today, we have a couple machine learning guys on our team right now. We're building this crazy store vision project right here, where it's an AI store, right? No one's behind the computer drawing a box around there. That's an AI agent, saying that is an item that person has.
Yeah, we're working with all these crazy technologies to try and build these really great systems that are going to advance technology. They're going to be disruptors in the financial retail space. And it's great. We have great chemistry together. We come from different backgrounds, and we mesh really well.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned, your team, you got to have machine learning guy. You got to have some variance on your team, all right? Everyone can't have the same skill set. You need to understand everyone's strengths and everyone's weaknesses, especially if you want to move fast. Our goal is to deliver not only, once at the end of our project cycle, but we want to show progress. We run in iterations, not just the end of the week, but we want to show something at the end of every day. And as Shuki said, it's super important to be motivated and to be able to do that. But you have to understand how to work with your team. You're a startup. We have a couple full-time people, a couple interns. We got to make the most of our time together. Because if we're not going to show results, if we're not going to disrupt the company, who else is? If you have to make a product, you have to deliver for that customer. You make a promise to them. So we're trying to innovate and make new things so the customers can have something to look forward to.
Yeah, and we're neighbors now, so if you guys are ever interested to kind of learn more about what we do, the products we're building, feel free to swing by, come hang out with us.
Yeah,
we'd love to have you.
This is shot in our brand new lab, so it's really special to us. It's kind of like we're working out of a garage, right? That's what it looks like. I mean, that building is amazing, but we're not actually in the garage. But you get the point. It's cool, yeah, you guys should feel more than welcome to come stop by. We're always looking for more people to join the team. Also, thank you.
Thank you very much. So, 2 things that and I think that Paul mentioned that when you run such kind of companies, very paranoid, because every day can be your last day. But on the other hand, you need to be very optimistic. Okay? So optimistic is not the opposite for paranoid, because if you are paranoid and you are optimistic, and you have a good team, you will win. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiki. So did y'all get what was going on in the background there when they were throwing the items around and it was moving from receipt to receipt? So that is the future of brick and mortar retailing. That's some of the innovation that's going on. And one of the important things to take away there is if we're successful in this, it will make some of our existing revenue streams go away. That's okay. That's how progress happens. That's how innovation happens. And for a company to survive and thrive, you can't be afraid of that. You have to embrace it and run towards it. Okay, we love being here in Midtown. This is the one area where I'm going to use some notes because I wanted to not forget to mention a few things. First of all, we not only obviously are here or have our presence, we want to be a really good member of the community around us. And part of that is trying to build a really good partnership with Georgia Tech. I think another lesson that you can learn as a company is that no company does it alone, especially in today's world. You think of things like open source, you think of the gig economy, right? Nobody, it's not like the old days where somebody does, everything on their own. So for us, we are trying to make significant investments in Georgia Tech in the community here, including the Denning T&M College. We're a CAP sponsor there. We're a CAP sponsor for the College of Computing. We're on the Executive Council for a Business Analytics Center here at Scheller. And we're a Georgia Promise sponsor for the endowment fund here. So for us, it's also really important to be part of the community, to get connected here and to continue to build our relationship with this fine institution. Now, I suspect some of you in the audience already have a connection to NCR, so at some risk of potentially being a little bit embarrassed here, we're going to try a little exercise. Would you stand up if you are now or if you're going to be a full-time employee at NCR? Wow. Cool. All right. Now stay standing. Everybody stay standing. Stand up if you are an intern or a co-op for 2018. Very cool. All right. And then stay standing. And anybody else who's engaged in any of the NCR-related projects in a class or anything like that? We have any of you here? A few more. Excellent. Now, my only sales pitch, I'm here to add value to you, not to me. My only sales pitch is if you have an offer from NCR and you haven't committed, what are you waiting for? We're ready. We got a lot of work to do to keep this train rolling, and we'd love to have you on board. Okay, you can all sit down. All right, it's 10 after. Q&A time. So we talked about transformation. We talked about disruption and innovation. Shiki and the team talked a lot about the importance of teamwork, the importance of their work environment. So the rest of the time is yours. What's on your mind?
You probably know Clayton Christensen, disruptive innovation, but he would say that if you want to have a disruptive group, you want to put them outside the company rather than inside the company, because over time, the legacy company will eventually strangle the funding for the disruptive group. And I noticed that your approach is to keep it inside NCR, which is fine, but how do you plan to make this sustainable, particularly if you don't begin to see immediate results coming from the innovation group?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is a real challenge that companies face. It is really easy to invest in innovation when the wind's at your back. But corporations, when they face challenging times, tend to tighten the belt, and sometimes those things look discretionary. So I want Shuki actually to participate in answering this question. But one of the things I'll tell you, two things have been really important for us from my perspective, and I'll turn it over to him. One is we have this history in the company of having to do this several times to kind of reinvent ourselves. So I do think that's actually one of the advantages of being 134 years old, is not much scares you, and you know the importance of having to kind of stay the course and invest. And even sometimes when your owners want to look one quarter at a time, you have to be willing to take a longer view. You're really not doing them any favors when you get too short-term focused. One of the things that Shuki is doing, which I think is really innovative, is he's got a relatively small team, and that team works to engage everybody at NCR in innovation. And you might touch on things like 90 days challenges and some of those sort of things.
So we come with a concept that we call 90 days project. The idea behind it is every quarter we decided from scratch what to work on, what to innovate on. We are working with the ISG. This is a solution group that telling us what are the next challenge that the company willing to innovate or to disrupt. And then we are starting very small. And then what happens when you start small, that others people say, hey, this is really cool what you're doing, can we join for that? And then we are starting 3, 4, 5 people. In the middle of the project, we have almost 20 people. Okay? And by the way, this concept, if you're going to talk with other company, Google, Amazon, everyone using the same concept. Okay? You are bringing people to work on your innovation projects because it's interesting for them, it's important for them. They are passionate for that, they will succeed for that. So you need to scale your people, not just going and have a very solid team, is to start small. To be honest, is to think big, start small, and scale fast later on into production. Okay?
One of the things Shuki's done an amazing job of is creating programs around the company where I'll use the example of an engineer. They can devote a portion of their time. They can carve out a portion of their time. It's what, half a Friday every other week, right?
It's a Future Friday. 2 times a month, we give the teams to work on their projects. They can work whatever they would like. In most cases, it's relevant to NCR, but let's assume that we give them the feeling that they are working on something that they are working on them. This program ran, I think, almost 2 years. Very high succeed. I think about 30 to 40% of things that came from the Future Friday are going later on to be part of the roadmap. So it's high succeed. We see that as a good succeed. Again, we started very small, by the way, here in Midtown, in the Biltmore building. And we are now taking that to other sites, and especially for the new campus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So, what are your, I see that you guys are doing very cool stuff with the innovation. What are your technology strategy kind of like behind the new innovation? And in terms of like IP, how are you going to catch the and capture the profits from the new innovation that you are working on right now?
Yeah, a lot of there's a lot of success and interest in the technology space around platform-based business models, right? So what you see if you look at the companies succeeding the most, they're operating in a platform-based business model. Now, a lot of the things you interact with every day, like social media platform, Facebook's probably old to you guys, but to old people like me, we use Facebook, right? Or Uber, right? Those are platform-based business models. So Uber doesn't actually sell anything, right? They connect people who need a ride with people who have a car, right? That's a platform-based business model. Airbnb connects people who need a place to stay with people who have a room, right? Facebook is basically a platform where people share information about their lives and advertisers pay to watch that and suggest things you might be interested in, right? And so for NCR, a lot of our journey is actually moving from a product-based business model to a platform-based business model. That means also moving from how we monetize the business, right? So NCR has a history going all the way back to the cash register of saying we're going to build something and there's a very distinct customer who will buy it and there's an exchange of value, right? Our biggest innovation today, or our biggest area of investment today, is actually something we call the Omni-Channel Decision Support Platform. And that is actually something nobody directly pays us for, right? But what it does is it takes all of these, think again of a retailer. It's the simplest example to paint. All the ways you interact with a retailer. You may shop in the store, you may connect online through e-commerce, through mobile, right? You may, in the case of a restaurant, you may go to Grubhub and connect with them to have them bring you food, right? There are lots of channels with which you can engage with a business today, right? Where there's been a lack of investment is in somebody to kind of rationalize all those channels so that the retailer, the bank, or the restaurant can see one version of a customer, no matter which channel they want to interact on, and meet that consumer where they are with the information they need to make the best decision, right? So if you shop online with a big retailer, you may have a very different experience than if you shop in the store. There could be different items at different prices. You can't start online and then finish in the store. And so what our platform does is it aims to create kind of one version of the truth of the consumer, the loyalty systems, the inventory, all of those things in one place so that no matter how a consumer interacts with a retailer, they'll have a consistent experience. Now, how we monetize that starts to be very different because the ways we create value around that are now a system of services and APIs that other companies can actually subscribe to and add value around, right? So we've had this very traditional two-dimensional business model for quite a long time, and we're moving to a multi-dimensional business model where we make this platform available to all our retailer customers. They may pay us for an application that we provide that accesses the platform, or they may go to a third party, use the Grubhub example again, right, for a restaurant who wants access to our store systems. And Grubhub actually pays us, right? So now we create a more seamless experience for the consumer and the restaurant, the consumer, all benefit, but Grubhub is actually where we monetize it, and they're who pays us. So NCR is in transition from a very traditional, two-dimensional business model to a platform-based business model as well. So this, what Shuki showed you, is an example of a channel system that is an in-the-store, frictionless channel experience, right? It's the next generation of the cash register. There's just no hardware that anybody can see, right? But that would be an example of a service that would hang off of our platform that a customer would actually pay us for. There are other services that a third party might actually pay us for that we would monetize. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I'll let you guys manage the room. Sorry.
Hi. I just want to thank you for coming here today. So my question was, so you know companies like Amazon, they've been disrupting businesses in a lot of industries. With the recent acquisition of Whole Foods, they want to disrupt that industry as well. So my question is, because I guess consumers are moving towards more of a online shopping experience, and you guys you make cash registers. do you feel how do you compete with that? I know you guys make cash registers, and if less people go to convenience stores or any retail places, then how do you see value in your product?
No, great question. And rest assured, most of our profit does not come from selling cash register today, as my colleague Adrian right here can assure you. But it's a valid point, and that's what this whole disrupting yourselves thing is about, right? So think about our customers, right? Our customers have to compete in this new world. Let's take a grocery store as an example, right? So what a grocery store looks like today and what it will look like in the future are very different things. The grocery stores that your parents enjoyed, right, were a large box. Around the edge of it was a lot of fresh food, right? And in the middle was staples, all the paper stuff, right? By the way, that's all the stuff that Amazon will just ship to you automatically right now, right? It's the toilet paper and the dog food and the toothpaste and all that stuff in the middle of the store, right? So the grocery store of the future is going to look very different. It's going to be your local market where you pick up the fresh items that you'll use to create a meal that day, right? Based on what you wanted to have that day. Now, Amazon, who's bought Whole Foods, is willing to deliver that to your house in 2 hours or less, right? So that's good as well. So our customers have to compete in this world of Amazon. By the way, it's true of banks. Banks aren't being disrupted so much by Amazon, but they're being disrupted. How many of you have, raise your hand if you've been in a bank branch in the last 6 months? Who has? About a third of you have been in a bank branch in the last 6 months. So this is true of all the businesses we sold. Now raise your hand if you have a checkbook. I want to see how many of you have a checkbook. About a third, okay. Raise your hand if you use Venmo. Okay, so more of you in this room use Venmo than have a checkbook. So that's an example of disruption. That's the banks being disrupted. I'm not trying to dodge your question, but it's a great analogy to the retailers being disrupted. So all of our customers are having to deal with this, right? So retailers, they may have fewer locations, right? They're going to be different. They're going to serve a different need. The pantry is going to be restocked by Amazon or by Walmart online, right? The pantry in your house is going to be restocked. So the purpose of brick and mortar is going to be far more specialized. It's going to be far more occasion-based. And so our customers, and it's going to be highly technological, right? We just saw an example of the sort of technology retailers will be deploying to create the kind of experiences consumers want, right? Merged online and in the store, frictionless experiences. So when we think about it, we think, yeah, it's entirely possible actually there'll be less retail outlets in the future than there are today. In fact, it's probably likely. Retail's overbuilt, right? But those outlets will use far more technology, right? So when we look at our prospects of a company, as a company, we say, okay, so the days of point of sale hardware or even ATMs, right? Most of you probably aren't going to ATMs very often anymore, right? That may be a much smaller revenue source for us in the future. That doesn't mean our customers don't have to innovate with technology. We just have to be willing to disrupt ourselves and replace the things that we've sold them in the past with the things that they're going to need in the future. And so that's how we address that. We look at what does the bank, the retailer, the restaurant of the future look like? How are they going to compete with the Amazons of the world for that consumer experience? And that's our job, to help them stay relevant and survive. And it's okay if they look different. It's okay if there are fewer locations and they're smaller. They're going to use a lot of technology, and that's where we come in.
You actually touched on where I was headed, which is NCR has a very distinguished history with both financial institutions, the ATM, as well as in retail. I was observing in China in December the war between Alibaba and WeChat, where the retailers are moving to the finance control and the finance people are moving into retail. How do you see the future of NCR in bringing that merger here?
The intersection of financial services and retail? Yeah, I see NCR as an enabler of consumer experiences, right, for the segments we serve. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is as we move from a product-based business model to a platform-based business model, and we start to aggregate all this data, right, consumer data, merchant data, in one place, we will be part of the benefit of our platform is that it will create a place where financial institutions, retailers, restaurants, movie theaters, the like, can actually opt in to share information where they mutually benefit each other. So think about it this way. If I'm a community financial institution, I'm not talking about Bank of America, I'm talking about your local credit union, right? And I know that I share consumers with the local movie theater, the local restaurant, the local pet food store, but we have no way to connect all that information about those consumers and share and actually promote to each other's consumers. NCR because we are the technology. 700 million transactions a day go through our endpoints around the world, 700 million a day. So we are the endpoint where those transactions happen across all those spaces. One of the big opportunities with our platform is to actually start to build those connections where those companies can actually market to each other. So we see a huge opportunity actually down market. At the top of the market, you know, what Walmart's going to work out with Bank of America, we're probably less involved with, quite frankly. But where the American economy is really driven, which is down market, SMB, there's a huge opportunity for us to help them help each other. So that's something that we really look forward to. We got time for one or two more.
So you mentioned that NCR now is right here.
Where are you? Sorry.
So you mentioned NCR right now is a software company. So what's NCR's vision for 2020 or for next 4 to 5 years in the software space?
Yeah, our vision is largely around our omni-channel platform, right? So enabling businesses of all sizes to not only interact with consumers through whatever channel they want, right? Whether that's e-commerce, in the store, mobile, but really use the data that creates to create a richer experience for everybody. So if you think about, I'll give you one more use case. You think about when you're shopping, again, you're shopping on Amazon, you look at something, you start getting recommendations, right? When you walk into a Best Buy, right, and you're maybe on a mission for one item, it's really hard for them to know who you are and alert you to something you might be interested in the store. Just you don't mind when Amazon does it when you're online, but you're almost a little offended when a human walks up to you in Best Buy and wants to do the same thing. So how can we use technology to kind of create that same sort of experience in a brick and mortar? You might start online and then go in the store because you want to touch it and feel it right before you complete the transaction. So NCR will be kind of at the center of using all these endpoints, the omni-channel platform, and data to really create rich consumer experiences that drive recommendations, that drives revenue growth for our customers, that drives consumer stickiness and consumer loyalty for consumers. And so, you know, we showed you one little snippet at what like the future of retailing will look like today. But when you put it all together, we have a vision for 2020 and the future that I would love to stay and tell you more about, that is really all about this thing we call omni-channel and decision support as it relates to that platform. So, okay.
We have time for one more question.
Last one. Yeah. Yeah. We worry about security. We worry about data privacy every day. It's like for any company, by the way, it's an enterprise risk issue that has got board level attention. When you're handling when you're handling thousands of other companies' data and consumer data like NCR is, it's actually one of the top priority items. There's actually nothing more important. Before I came here today, I was sitting in something we have to do once a quarter. It's called an enterprise risk management review. It's like one of those things that's both vitally important and really boring, right? And those are exactly the sort of things we talk about. And so you have to be very organized around it. You have to have design principles and everything that you built that are security and privacy first. It has to be by design at the beginning. You have to test yourself constantly, and you have to be willing to invite third parties in to try and prove you wrong. And we do all of the above. And whether you're starting a small company or working for a big company, you're going to find in this connected universe that we live in today that is kind of table stakes for doing business today. It is not an area you can take a shortcut on. You really run the risk of letting everybody down if you do that. So it is significant. By the way, it's a bit of a tax on doing business. It's expensive, but it's table stakes. It's price of entry. It's what you have to do. That's it?
Thank you, Mr. Paul. We appreciate you.
Ah, wow.